I came home from a business trip to find 15 strangers sitting in my heated garage, drinking coffee from my machine, and discussing whether Mrs. Patterson's lawn gnome violated community standards. The shock hit me first, then the anger, and I stood there in my own driveway in Boise, Idaho, watching these people treat my property like their personal conference room. My truck was still running behind me, engine ticking in the February cold, and nobody inside seemed to notice I had arrived. Through the side door window, I could see them arranged in a semicircle on folding chairs that definitely were not mine yesterday. Papers spread across a table I had never seen before. I killed the engine and stepped out. The temperature was maybe 10 degrees, typical for February in Idaho, but my garage was clearly warm enough for these people to have removed their coats. That was my radiant floor heating they were enjoying, the system I had installed last year for $12,000 so I could work on my woodworking projects in comfort during winter. I tried the side door, locked from the inside. My own garage locked against me. Walking around to the main garage door, I used my remote. The door rattled up, letting in a blast of cold air that made everyone inside turn toward me with annoyed expressions, like I was the one interrupting something important. A woman in her mid-50s with that particular haircut, the one that screams, "I want to speak to your manager," stood up immediately. She wore a purple cardigan and had reading glasses on a chain around her neck. "Excuse me, we are in the middle of an official HOA meeting," she said, her voice sharp. "You cannot just barge in here." I stepped into my own garage, letting the door close behind me to keep the heat in. "This is my garage, my property. Who the hell are you people?" The woman drew herself up, clutching a binder to her chest like a shield. "I am Patricia Drummond, president of the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association, and we have every right to be here. This space was designated for community use." Designated by who? By the HOA board, of course. She gestured to the others sitting around the table. "We have been meeting here for 3 weeks now while our community center undergoes renovation." 3 weeks. I had been gone for 3 weeks, visiting clients across the Northwest for my consulting business. My neighbor, old Mr. Chen, had been checking on the house, but apparently he had not noticed an entire HOA occupation of my garage. "Nobody asked my permission," I said, working to keep my voice level. "You cannot just use someone's private property without asking." A man in a polo shirt, despite the winter weather, spoke up. "Actually, according to Section 7.4 of the HOA bylaws, the association has the right to utilize available community spaces for official business during emergencies or facility unavailability. This is not a community space. This is my private garage." Patricia smiled, the kind of smile that did not reach her eyes. "Your property is part of the Riverside Heights community, which means it falls under HOA jurisdiction. We sent out a newsletter 3 weeks ago informing all residents of the temporary meeting location change. You sent out a newsletter saying you would be using my garage. We sent out a newsletter saying we would be using the available heated community space at 847 Riverside Drive. That is your address, is it not, Mr. Harrison?" My full name is Kevin Harrison. And yes, 847 Riverside Drive was my address, the house I had bought 2 years ago after my divorce, the place I had poured time and money into making perfect for my needs. The garage was not just storage. It was my workshop, my retreat, the place where I built custom furniture that I sold online to supplement my consulting income. "You cannot do this," I said. "I am telling you right now, meeting is over. Everyone out." Patricia's expression hardened. "Mr. Harrison, we understand you are upset, but we are in the middle of important community business. We will be done in approximately 45 minutes, and then we will vacate the premises. However, I should remind you that obstruction of official HOA business can result in fines starting at $500 per incident. The audacity of her words actually made me laugh. You are threatening to fine me for not letting you occupy my garage. We are reminding you of your obligations as a member of this community. I looked around at the others. Some looked uncomfortable, others defiant. One woman was still sipping coffee from my machine, a premium espresso maker I had bought myself for Christmas. My tools were pushed against the walls, my workbench shoved into the corner, my half-finished dining table project covered with a tarp and buried under their coats. "Everyone out," I repeated. "Now, or I call the police for trespassing." Patricia sighed dramatically. "Very well, if you insist on being difficult. But this will be noted in your permanent HOA record, Mr. Harrison. We will be discussing your lack of community cooperation at our next board meeting." "Which will not be in my garage," I said. It took another 20 minutes for them to pack up their things. They moved with deliberate slowness, making a show of carefully organizing their papers, folding their chairs with excessive precision, whispering to each other just loud enough for me to hear fragments like "so unreasonable" and "never seen such hostility." Patricia was the last to leave. She paused at the door, turning back to face me. "The community center will not be ready for at least another month, Mr. Harrison. We will need to find an alternative location. If you change your mind about being a team player, you know how to reach us." "Do not hold your breath," I said. After they left, I spent an hour putting my garage back together. The coffee machine was empty and needed cleaning. There were scuff marks on my expensive epoxy floor from their chairs. Someone had unplugged my tool battery chargers to plug in their laptop. My thermostat for the radiant heating was cranked up to 78 degrees, running my electric bill up for their comfort. I was furious, but I was also calculating. These people had used my space without permission for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of heating, electricity, wear and tear on my property. 3 weeks of preventing me from using my own garage for its intended purpose. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer, David Kimmel, a guy I had worked with during my divorce. His office was in downtown Boise, a modest suite in one of the older buildings near the Capitol. "They did what?" he asked when I explained the situation. "Used my garage for 3 weeks without asking, then tried to claim they had the right to do it through HOA bylaws." David leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming on his desk. "Do you have a copy of your HOA bylaws and covenants?" "Somewhere. I never really read them when I bought the place. The neighborhood seemed quiet, the HOA fees were reasonable. I just signed the papers." "That was your first mistake," David said, but he was smiling slightly. "Okay, get me those documents. Also, document everything from yesterday. Write down exactly what happened, who was there, what they said. Take photos of any damage or changes to your property." "What are my options here?" "Well, unless your HOA documents explicitly grant them access to your garage, which I seriously doubt, they committed trespassing. The question is what you want to do about it." He paused. "You could sue for damages, but honestly, that is probably more trouble than it is worth for what you would recover. However, there might be another angle." "What angle?" "If they want to keep using your space, make them pay for it." Commercial rental rates for a heated workshop space in Boise are not cheap. Draw up a contract, set a fair market rate, and offer it to them. If they accept, you make money. If they refuse, they have no leg to stand on for future access. I liked the way he thought. That afternoon, I researched commercial rental rates for heated garage and workshop spaces in the Boise area. A climate-controlled space of roughly 600 square feet, which was my garage size, went for anywhere from $400 to $800 per month, depending on location and amenities. My garage was in a good neighborhood, had premium heating, electricity, water access, and that espresso machine. I figured $750 per month was fair. For their weekly meetings of approximately 3 hours each, that broke down to about $175 per meeting, or roughly $700 per month for 4 meetings. Actually, looking at event space rentals, which was more accurate for what they were doing, the rates were higher. Conference rooms in Boise rented for anywhere from $50 to $150 per hour, depending on size and amenities. My space was premium. I decided on $125 per hour with a 3-hour minimum, which came to $375 per meeting. David helped me draft a professional rental agreement. It included terms for liability insurance, security deposit, cleaning fees, utility charges, and strict rules about property access and use. It was thorough, legal, and completely legitimate. 2 days later, I printed copies of the agreement and drove to Patricia Drummond's house. She lived 4 streets over in one of the larger homes, a 2-story colonial with perfect landscaping and a fountain in the front yard that was currently turned off for winter. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, looking surprised to see me. "Mr. Harrison, what can I do for you?" I wanted to discuss the meeting space situation, I said, keeping my tone professional and neutral. "I understand the HOA needs a place to meet while your community center is unavailable." Her expression shifted to cautious interest. "Yes, that is correct. I am willing to rent my garage space to the HOA for your meetings at a fair market rate." I had my attorney draw up a standard rental agreement. I held out the papers. Patricia took them, her eyes scanning the first page. I watched her face change as she read the terms and saw the pricing. $375 per meeting. That is outrageous. That is actually below market rate for event space rental in Boise. I did my research. Climate-controlled conference rooms with amenities go for more than that. We are a homeowners association, not a corporation. We do not have unlimited funds. Then I suggest you find an alternative location. But if you want to use my property, these are the terms. Non-negotiable." She kept reading, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Security deposit of $1,000. Liability insurance requirements." These terms are ridiculous for a simple community meeting. These terms are standard for any rental agreement. You will be using my property, my utilities, my equipment. This protects both of us. "The HOA board will never approve this," Patricia said, handing the papers back. "Then we are done here. Just to be clear, if anyone from the HOA enters my property without my explicit written permission going forward, I will call the police and press charges for trespassing. I will also pursue legal action for the 3 weeks of unauthorized use that already occurred." That got her attention. "You cannot sue the HOA for that. We acted in good faith based on our interpretation of the bylaws." "Your interpretation was wrong. I checked with my attorney. Nothing in the HOA documents grants you access to my private garage. So yes, I absolutely can sue, and I will have documentation of the damages and unauthorized use. Or you can sign this rental agreement and we can move forward professionally." Patricia's face flushed red. "This is extortion. No, this is business. You want to use my property, you pay fair market rate. Simple as that." She clutched the papers, her knuckles white. "I will discuss this with the board." "You do that. But just so we are clear, there will be no more meetings in my garage without a signed agreement and payment in full." "Have a nice day, Patricia." I left her standing in the doorway and drove home feeling pretty satisfied with myself. 3 days passed without hearing anything. I assumed they had found another location, which was fine by me. I got back to work on my furniture projects, enjoying the peace and quiet of my garage. Then, on Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. It was not Patricia this time. It was 3 members of the HOA board, a man in his 60s named Walter, a younger woman named Susan, and another middle-aged woman named Brenda. Patricia was notably absent. "Mr. Harrison, we would like to discuss the rental proposal," Walter said. He had the tired look of someone who did not really want to be there but had been delegated the task anyway. I invited them in, offering coffee which they declined, and we sat in my living room. "The board has reviewed your terms," Walter continued. "We feel the pricing is steep, but we understand your position. However, we were hoping to negotiate a lower rate given that this is for community benefit, not commercial use." "The rate reflects the market value of the space and amenities," I said, "but I am open to hearing your counteroffer." Susan spoke up. "We were thinking something like $100 per meeting. That is still $400 per month, which is a significant expense for our budget." $100 does not even cover the utility costs of running the heat and electricity for a 3-hour meeting, let alone the wear on my property and the inconvenience of having my workspace occupied. "But you are part of this community," Brenda said, leaning forward. "We all need to make sacrifices for the common good. I am willing to let you use my private property, which is already a sacrifice, but I am not going to subsidize the HOA's operations out of my own pocket. $375 per meeting is my price. Take it or leave it." They exchanged glances. Walter sighed. "Could we negotiate on the security deposit and insurance requirements? Those seem excessive." "The security deposit is refundable as long as there is no damage to my property. The insurance is standard liability coverage that the HOA should already have for its operations." "These are not excessive, they are prudent." More silent communication between them. Finally, Susan nodded slightly. "We need to take this to a full board vote," Walter said. "Can you give us until Wednesday?" "Wednesday is fine, but remember, no meetings in my garage without a signed agreement." They left, and I had a feeling this was not over. Wednesday came and went with no word. Thursday morning, I got a certified letter from the HOA's attorney, a firm called Morrison & Associates. The letter was dense legalese, but the gist was clear. The HOA was asserting that Section 7.4 of the bylaws did grant them access to community spaces during emergencies, that my garage qualified as a community space due to some arcane interpretation of the property covenants, and that my refusal to allow meetings constituted obstruction of HOA business. They were threatening fines and potential legal action if I did not comply. I immediately forwarded the letter to David. He called me an hour later. "This is garbage. Their interpretation of Section 7.4 is creative at best, delusional at worst. Your garage is explicitly listed as part of your private residence, not community property. They have no case. So what do we do? I will respond on your behalf, explaining in very clear legal terms why they are wrong." "But Kevin, I have to ask, do you actually want them renting your garage, or would you rather just shut this whole thing down?" I thought about it. "Honestly, if they are willing to pay fair market rate and follow the rules, I do not mind the extra income. But I am not going to be bullied into giving them free access." "Fair enough. Let me handle the legal response. In the meantime, keep documenting everything." David's response letter was apparently quite effective, because 2 days later I got a call from Patricia herself. "Mr. Harrison, the board has voted to accept your rental terms," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "We can meet Monday to sign the agreement." "That works for me. My attorney will be present as well. That is not necessary. I insist. This is a legal contract. I want everything done properly. A long pause. Fine. Monday at 6 p.m. Your place. Monday evening, David and I sat at my dining room table with Patricia, Walter, and the HOA's attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s named Michelle Reed. We went through the rental agreement line by line, making minor clarifications but no substantial changes. The HOA would pay $375 per meeting, with meetings scheduled weekly on Wednesday evenings from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. They would provide proof of liability insurance, pay a security deposit of $1,000, and give me 24 hours notice before each meeting. They were responsible for cleaning up after themselves and returning the space to its original condition. Patricia signed the agreement with visible reluctance, her pen pressing hard enough into the paper to leave indentations on the pages beneath. "The first meeting under this agreement will be this Wednesday," she said. "I will send you the payment and deposit via check tomorrow." "The agreement specifies payment in full before access is granted," I reminded her. "The check will clear before Wednesday. Then we are all set." After they left, David shook my hand. "Well done. You just turned an annoying situation into a decent side income." Assuming they actually pay and do not cause problems. That is what the contract is for. If they violate any terms, you have grounds to terminate and keep the deposit. The check arrived Tuesday. I deposited it immediately and confirmed it cleared Wednesday morning. That evening at 6:45 p.m., I opened my garage door and did a final check of the space. I had set up a long, folding table I had bought specifically for this purpose, arranged chairs borrowed from the church where my sister worked, and made sure the coffee machine was clean and ready. The heat was set to a comfortable 68 degrees. At 7 p.m. exactly, Patricia arrived with 3 other board members. She inspected the space like a general surveying a battlefield, nodding grudgingly. "This will do," she said. "Coffee is available. Please remember to clean up everything before you leave. I will be in the house if you need anything." I left them to their meeting and went inside to work on some client reports. 3 hours later, I heard cars leaving and went out to check the garage. They had left it reasonably clean, though someone had spilled a bit of coffee that I had to wipe up. Overall, not bad. The next several weeks fell into a routine. Wednesday evenings, the HOA would meet in my garage. I would occasionally check in, but mostly left them alone. The money was good, and as long as they followed the rules, I was content. Then came the incident with the community center. It was early April, about 2 months into our rental arrangement, when Patricia called me on a Thursday morning. "Mr. Harrison, I wanted to inform you that the community center renovations are complete. However, the board has voted to continue meeting at your location." I was surprised. "Why? I thought the whole point was temporary space while renovations happened." "We have found your garage to be a more convenient and comfortable location than the community center. Better heating, better coffee, closer to where most board members live. So we would like to extend our rental agreement." "For how long?" "Indefinitely. We will continue under the same terms, with the option to cancel with 30 days' notice from either party." I thought about it. The income was useful, and they had been mostly fine to deal with. "All right. I will have my attorney draw up an amended agreement reflecting the indefinite term." "That is acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Harrison." After she hung up, I realized I had basically become a landlord to my own HOA. It was a weird situation, but it was working. Summer came and the meetings continued. I got to know some of the board members a bit better. Walter was actually a decent guy, a retired engineer who seemed to genuinely care about the neighborhood. Susan was young, maybe early 30s, and new to the HOA, trying to bring fresh ideas that Patricia usually shot down. Brenda was Patricia's closest ally, agreeing with everything Patricia said like a bobblehead doll. In July, something changed. I came home from a client meeting one Wednesday afternoon to find a catering van in my driveway. I parked on the street and walked up to find a crew setting up food warmers and serving trays in my garage. I found Patricia supervising the setup. "What is going on?" "The HOA is hosting a community appreciation event tonight." "Nothing major, just some food and drinks while we conduct our regular meeting." "This was not part of our agreement. You rent the space for board meetings, not events." "It is still a board meeting, Mr. Harrison. We are simply providing refreshments for attendees." "How many attendees?" 30 or 40, perhaps." "No, absolutely not. Our agreement covers your board meetings, which is typically 6 to 8 people, not a 40-person event." Patricia's expression hardened. "The agreement says Wednesday evening meetings. It does not specify the number of attendees." "It absolutely does. It is in the context of regular board operations, which has an implied reasonable number of participants. This is a different use of the space entirely. We are not changing our plans now. The food is paid for, invitations have been sent. This event is happening." I pulled out my phone and called David. He answered immediately, and I explained the situation. "Kevin, you are absolutely right," he said loud enough for Patricia to hear. "This violates the spirit and intent of your agreement. Tell them they need to cancel or find another venue." I relayed the message. Patricia glared at me. "Fine, but this is extremely embarrassing for the HOA and you will be responsible for the consequences." "The consequences of enforcing a contract I signed in good faith. I will live with that." She made calls, angry, hushed conversations, while the catering crew stood around awkwardly. Eventually, she got the church down the street to let them use their fellowship hall. The catering crew packed up and left, Patricia giving me one last withering look before driving away. That should have been the end of it, but it was not. 2 weeks later, I got a notice that I was being fined $500 for uncooperative behavior detrimental to community welfare. I called David immediately. "They are fining me for enforcing our rental agreement. Do not pay it." "I will draft a response. This is retaliation, clear as day." His response letter pointed out that the fine was baseless and retaliatory, and that continued harassment would result in legal action against the HOA and its board members personally. The fine was quietly withdrawn, but the relationship between Patricia and me had gone from professional to openly hostile. The meetings continued, but the atmosphere was tense. Patricia made snide comments about the space being overpriced and how my greed was forcing them to cut other community programs. I bit my tongue and collected my rental fees. In September, things escalated again. I came home one afternoon to find the locks on my garage side door had been changed. I could not get into my own garage. I called Patricia immediately. "Why are the locks changed on my garage door?" The HOA board voted that since we are renting the space regularly, we needed secure access for our files and equipment. We had new locks installed for security purposes. "That is my property. You cannot change locks without my permission. According to our rental agreement, we have access to the space during rental periods. We needed to secure our materials. The rental period is Wednesday evenings, not 24/7. I need access to my garage for my own use. You will have those locks changed back immediately or provide me with keys. I will discuss it with the board." "No discussion needed. I want keys today or I am calling a locksmith and billing the HOA for it. And Patricia, I am documenting this. You just made a serious mistake." 2 hours later, Walter showed up at my door with a set of keys, looking embarrassed. "Sorry about this, Kevin. Patricia did not consult with the rest of us before having the locks changed. Here are your keys. We will make sure this does not happen again." "Thanks, Walter. I appreciate you being reasonable about this." After he left, I called David again. "I think I need to terminate this rental agreement. Patricia is getting out of control. You can terminate with 30 days notice per the contract." "But Kevin, if you do that, you know she is going to make your life hell with HOA nonsense, right? Fines for every tiny violation, harassment about property maintenance, the whole 9 yards. She is already doing that." "Fair point. Write up a termination notice." "I will review it, and we will send it certified mail." I drafted the notice that evening, citing multiple violations of the rental agreement, including the unauthorized lock change and the attempted expansion of use for the catering event. I gave them 30 days to vacate and stated that the security deposit would be returned once I had inspected for damages. The notice was sent certified mail on Monday. Patricia signed for it on Tuesday. Wednesday evening, I was prepared for confrontation, but nobody showed up for the meeting. My phone rang at 7:15 p.m. It was Walter. "Kevin, the board received your termination notice. Patricia is furious, but I want you to know that some of us understand your position. We will be out by the end of the month." "I appreciate that, Walter. And for what it is worth, I have no problem with you or most of the board. This is about Patricia's behavior." "I know. Look, between you and me, a lot of people are getting tired of how she runs things. There is talk of calling for new elections. Good luck with that. Let me know if you need anything for the move out." October passed quietly. The HOA held no more meetings in my garage, presumably finding space at the church or community center. I sent back their security deposit minus a small cleaning fee for some stains on the floor, fully documented with photos. I thought it was over. I was wrong. In November, I started receiving violation notices. First, my fence was apparently 3 inches too tall according to HOA standards. Then my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My garbage cans were visible from the street for 10 minutes after pickup. My holiday decorations were installed 2 days before the approved December 1st date. Every single notice came with a fine. $50 here, $100 there. All signed by Patricia as HOA president. I documented everything and refused to pay any of the fines, sending detailed responses explaining why each one was baseless or petty. David sent a formal letter warning the HOA that this pattern of harassment was creating liability for the board. Then I got the big one. A notice that my property was in severe violation of community standards and that I was being fined $5,000 with additional daily fines of $100 until the violations were corrected. The alleged violations were absurd. My grass was supposedly half an inch too long, my house number was faded and illegible, and my driveway had excessive staining. I took detailed photos of everything. My grass was perfectly maintained. My house number was clearly visible and freshly painted. My driveway had some minor oil stains like every driveway in America, nothing excessive. This time, I did not just call David. I also filed a complaint with the Idaho Attorney General's office regarding HOA abuse and started gathering evidence for a lawsuit against Patricia and the board personally for harassment. But before any of that could move forward, something else happened that changed everything. It was a cold December evening when Mr. Chen knocked on my door, looking worried. He was in his 70s, a widower who had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years. "Kevin, I need to talk to you about something," he said. "It is about the HOA." I invited him in and made tea. He sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around the warm mug. "I have been part of this HOA board on and off for years," he began. "I stepped down a few years ago because of my health, but I still have friends in the organization. They have been telling me things that concern me, especially about Patricia." "What kind of things?" "Money things. The HOA budget has not been adding up. There are expenses that do not make sense, payments to vendors that nobody recognizes." One of the board members, Susan, she started asking questions, and Patricia shut her down hard, threatened to sue her for defamation. My interest was piqued. "What kind of expenses?" "Landscaping payments to a company called Greenview Services. $1,500 a month." "But Kevin, we do not use that company. Our landscaping is done by Martinez Lawn Care, always has been." "Have you reported this?" Susan tried to bring it up at a board meeting. Patricia said it was a secondary service for special projects, but she could not provide details. Said the records were being audited and were temporarily unavailable. That was 3 months ago. This sounds like embezzlement. Mr. Chen nodded slowly. "That is what I think too, and I think it has been going on for a long time." I looked back at old financial reports from when I was on the board, and there are similar questionable payments going back at least 2 years. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Patricia has made you an enemy, which means you might actually do something about it. The rest of the board is either too scared of her or too apathetic to push. But you already stood up to her. Maybe you can help expose this." "What do you need me to do?" Susan is willing to talk, but she is afraid. "If you can get a lawyer involved, someone who knows how to handle this properly, she will provide the financial documents she has been able to access." I called David immediately. Within 2 days, we had a meeting set up with Susan at David's office. She brought a box of documents, bank statements, invoices, board meeting minutes, and her own notes. David spent hours going through everything. The pattern was clear. For the past 2.5 years, Patricia had been approving payments to several fictitious vendors. Greenview Services did not exist beyond a P.O. box. Neither did Summit Property Management, which supposedly handled special assessments. Neither did Riverside Consulting, which was allegedly providing advisory services. All told, Patricia had embezzled approximately $78,000 from the HOA. "This is serious criminal activity," David said. "We need to go to the police." Susan was pale. "If we do that, it will tear the community apart." "It is already torn apart," I said. "Patricia has been stealing from everyone in this neighborhood. That money was supposed to go toward maintaining our community, and instead she has been pocketing it. People have a right to know." David agreed. "Susan, I understand your reluctance, but this is not a matter we can handle internally. This requires law enforcement." It took another week to organize everything into a clear case, but finally, we had enough to go to the Boise Police Department. Detective Sarah Winters took our statement and reviewed the documents. She was thorough, asking detailed questions and taking careful notes. "We will need to verify these accounts and trace the money," she said. "That will take some time. Can you keep this quiet until we have built our case? We do not want to tip off the suspect." We agreed. For the next month, life went on as normal on the surface. I stopped receiving harassment fines from the HOA, which made me think someone had warned Patricia to back off. Christmas came and went. I spent it with my sister and her family, trying not to think about the investigation. In mid-January, Detective Winters called. "We have enough to make an arrest." We traced the money to accounts controlled by Patricia Drummond. She set up shell companies and has been systematically stealing from the HOA for nearly 3 years. Total amount we can prove is approximately $84,000. "When will you arrest her?" "Tomorrow morning." I wanted to give you a heads up since you were instrumental in bringing this to light." The next morning, I watched from my window as 2 police cars pulled up to Patricia's house. They were there for maybe 30 minutes before leading her out in handcuffs. Even from a distance, I could see the shock and anger on her face. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By noon, everyone knew. My phone rang constantly with neighbors asking if I knew what was happening. I directed them all to contact the police or the HOA board. An emergency HOA meeting was called for that evening. Nearly every homeowner showed up, packing the community center. Walter, as vice president, took charge of the meeting. He explained what had been discovered, how much money was missing, and what steps were being taken to recover the funds and ensure it could not happen again. The anger in the room was palpable. People had been paying their HOA dues faithfully, trusting that money was being used properly, and instead, their president had been stealing from them for years. "We will be conducting a full forensic audit," Walter announced. "We have also contacted a bonding company about potential insurance recovery, and obviously, Patricia Drummond has been removed from the board effective immediately." "What about restitution?" someone called out. "Will we get our money back?" "That will be up to the courts," Walter said. "But we will pursue every legal avenue available to recover what was stolen." Someone else stood up. "I want to thank Kevin Harrison for uncovering this. If he had not been willing to stand up to Patricia's harassment, we might never have known." There was a round of applause. I felt uncomfortable being in the spotlight but nodded in acknowledgement. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me personally. Mr. Chen gripped my hand firmly. "You did a good thing, Kevin. Not everyone would have had the courage." "I just wanted to stop her from harassing me," I admitted. "The embezzlement was Susan's discovery, not mine. But you took action. That matters." Patricia's trial was scheduled for June. In the meantime, she was released on bail, but she and her husband quietly listed their house for sale. The shame in the community was too much. She could not show her face anywhere in the neighborhood without people glaring or making comments. David helped the HOA board prepare their victim impact statements and coordinate with the prosecutor's office. The case was straightforward. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that she had merely been disorganized with bookkeeping, but the creation of shell companies and methodical theft over years made that argument laughable. In late June, Patricia Drummond pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 2 years, and ordered to pay full restitution of $84,000 plus interest and penalties. Her assets, including her house, were frozen for potential seizure to satisfy the restitution order. I attended the sentencing hearing. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished from the imperious HOA president who had tried to commandeer my garage. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she gave a brief apology that sounded more like self-pity than genuine remorse. Outside the courthouse afterward, Susan found me. "Thank you for seeing this through," she said. "A lot of people would have just walked away." She should not have stolen from the community. People trusted her. "The new board wants me to ask you something. We are having elections next month for a new president and board positions. Several people have suggested you run," I laughed. "Me? After everything that happened, I want nothing to do with HOA politics." "That is exactly why you would be good at it. You are not looking for power, you just want to be left alone to live your life. That is the kind of person we need running things." "Thanks, but no thanks." "I will vote, I will pay my dues, but I am done with drama," she smiled. "Fair enough, but if you change your mind, the door is open." I never did run for the HOA board, but I stayed involved enough to make sure the new leadership was honest and transparent. Walter was elected as the new president, and he did a solid job of rebuilding trust and implementing better financial controls. Susan became treasurer, bringing her background in accounting to ensure the books were properly maintained and regularly audited. My garage went back to being just my garage. I worked on my furniture projects in peace, built a beautiful entertainment center that sold for $3,000 online, and generally enjoyed the quiet of my space. The HOA eventually recovered about 60% of the stolen funds through insurance and asset seizure from Patricia's accounts. It was not everything, but it was enough to fund the repairs and improvements that had been neglected during her tenure. In October, nearly a year after the whole thing started, I was working in my garage when Walter stopped by. He had a bottle of good bourbon and 2 glasses. "Thought you might like a drink," he said. We sat in my garage, the heat on against the autumn chill, and shared the bourbon. "You know, this whole situation taught me something," Walter said. "People think HOAs are about property values and rules, but really they are about trust. We trust our neighbors to act in good faith, to look out for the community, to be honest. When that trust gets broken, everything falls apart." "Patricia broke that trust long before anyone realized it," I said. "True. But you helped us fix it. You stood up when it would have been easier to just move away or ignore the problems. That matters." We drank in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set through the garage door. "Your space here is pretty nice," Walter said eventually, looking around at my workshop setup. "Good heat, good lighting. I can see why Patricia wanted to hold meetings here." I laughed. She just should have asked nicely and been willing to pay fair market rate. That was never her style. She always thought the rules did not apply to her, that she deserved special treatment because of her position. He shook his head. "Funny how that worked out. Not funny for the people she stole from. No, you are right, but at least she is facing consequences." That does not always happen with this kind of thing. After Walter left, I closed up the garage and went inside. My house was warm and quiet, exactly the way I liked it. No HOA meetings, no drama, no Patricia Drummond trying to take over my space or harass me with petty fines. In the months that followed, life in Riverside Heights settled into a new normal. The community center got a fresh coat of paint and updated meeting spaces. The HOA newsletter, now run by a committee instead of solely by the president, included transparent financial reports and opportunities for resident input. Board meetings were held at the community center, properly scheduled and open to anyone who wanted to attend. I ran into Mr. Chin at the grocery store one afternoon in late November. His health had improved a bit, and he seemed lighter somehow, unburdened. "How are things going, Kevin?" he asked. "Good. Quiet, which is how I like it," he smiled. "That is the best outcome, is it not? A neighborhood where nothing dramatic happens because everyone is just living their lives in peace. That is all I ever wanted. You know, my wife used to say that the true measure of a community is not what happens when things are going well, but how people respond when things go wrong. You responded the right way. I just did not want people using my garage without paying," I said, somewhat embarrassed by the praise. "You did more than that. You held someone accountable who thought she was above accountability. You helped expose corruption. You reminded people that standing up for what is right matters, even when it is uncomfortable." We talked for a few more minutes before parting ways, but his words stayed with me. I had never set out to be any kind of hero or reformer. I just wanted my space respected and to be treated fairly. But somehow that had led to uncovering a significant crime and helping my community heal from a breach of trust. Patricia served 18 months before being granted early parole. She moved out of state immediately, and I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband divorced. The restitution payments continued through garnished wages, slowly repaying what she had stolen. 2 years after the whole saga began, I was putting the finishing touches on a custom bookshelf in my garage when my phone rang. It was David. "Hey Kevin, I am calling with some good news. The final restitution payment just cleared. Patricia has paid back the full amount she stole, plus interest and penalties. The HOA will be distributing the recovered funds to reimburse the improper fees and assessments she levied during her tenure." That is great news. There is more. Remember all those harassment fines she hit you with? Those are being refunded with interest. You are getting a check for about $3,000. I had forgotten about those fines, having written them off as the cost of dealing with Patricia's vendetta. Getting that money back felt like a final closing of the chapter. Thanks for letting me know, David, and thanks for all your help through this whole mess. That is what I am here for. Though I have to say, in 20 years of practicing law, this is one of the weirder cases I have handled. After hanging up, I stood in my garage looking around at my space. My tools organized on the walls, my workbench clean and ready for the next project, the radiant heat humming quietly beneath my feet. This was my sanctuary, the place I had worked hard to create and maintain. Patricia had tried to take it from me, first through presumption and entitlement, then through harassment and retaliation. But in the end, my simple insistence on being treated fairly had exposed her corruption and led to justice being served. I never did rent out my garage again, though Walter joked at a neighborhood barbecue that summer that if the HOA ever needed emergency meeting space, they knew my rates. $375 per meeting, inflation adjusted, I said, playing along. "We will keep that in mind if we are ever desperate," he laughed. The truth was, the new HOA board was functional and reasonable, the kind of organization that handled necessary community business without drama or overreach. They maintained common areas, organized occasional social events, and left individual homeowners alone unless there was a genuine problem. It was everything an HOA should be, but often was not. Sometimes I would see new residents moving into the neighborhood, and I would wonder if anyone told them the story of Patricia Drummond and the embezzlement scandal. It had become part of the community's history, a cautionary tale about the importance of oversight and accountability. My own role in the story had faded with time. New neighbors knew me as the guy with the woodworking hobby who sometimes sold furniture online, not as the person who had helped expose HOA corruption. That suited me fine. I had never wanted to be the center of attention. But I did take a certain quiet satisfaction in knowing that when it mattered, when someone needed to stand up and push back against abuse of authority, I had done it. Not because I was particularly brave or principled, but simply because I refused to be pushed around on my own property. That first moment, coming home to find my garage occupied by strangers who felt entitled to use my space without asking, could have gone differently. I could have shrugged it off, avoided confrontation, accepted their explanation that the HOA rules gave them some nebulous right to be there. Many people would have, choosing the path of least resistance. But I had chosen to set boundaries, to demand fair treatment, to insist that my property rights be respected. And that simple choice had cascaded into consequences neither Patricia nor I could have anticipated at the time. The last time I thought about Patricia was on a winter evening, working late in my garage on a commission piece. The heat was on. The lights were bright, and I was alone with my tools and materials, exactly as it should be. I wondered briefly if she ever thought about how differently things might have gone if she had simply knocked on my door that first day and asked permission like a reasonable person. If she had approached me respectfully, acknowledged that my garage was private property, and offered fair compensation for its use, I probably would have said yes. The rental income was nice, and I did not mind sharing my space when properly asked and compensated. But she had chosen entitlement over respect, assumed rights she did not have, and then retaliated when challenged. Those choices had cost her everything: her position, her reputation, her freedom, her marriage, her home, and her place in the community. It was a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. And it reinforced something I already believed. The rules apply to everyone, especially those in positions of authority. Maybe especially to them. I finished the commission piece, a beautiful oak dining table that would ship to a customer in Portland the next week. As I ran my hand over the smooth surface, checking for any imperfections, I felt grateful for this space, this skill, this peaceful life I had built. The HOA saga was over. Patricia had paid her debt. The neighborhood had moved on. And I was back to being exactly what I wanted to be. A guy who owned his home, practiced his craft, and lived his life on his own terms in his own space. Sometimes that is all the victory you need.